The sun burned low over Dry Creek, and the air shimmered with heat that clung to skin like memory. Eli Cartwright had spent the day at the edge of town, oiling his colt and listening to the wind drag sand across the corrals. He was 19, lean, and silent, the kind of young man who spoke more with his eyes than his mouth. Most folks figured him shy. Truth was, he'd never learned the right words for people, least of all women. The widow Tully passed the livery that evening, her black dress brushing the dust. Eli looked up from his work and froze. He'd seen her before, at the funeral, standing tall as the preacher's words fell flat against her grief. But this was the first time she looked back. "Mr. Cartwright," she said, voice low, steady. "Ma'am." He stood, hat in hand, unsure what else to do. "I hear you're tracking the men who killed my husband." "Yes, ma'am, been following their trail east, near Split Mesa. They ain't far." She studied him, her eyes the color of coffee cooled too long. "You mean to bring them in?" He hesitated. "Don't reckon they'll come in breathing." She nodded, as though she'd already expected that. "Wait here." When she returned, she held a small box wrapped in faded linen. Inside lay a revolver, pearl-handled, clean as a promise. She handed it to him carefully, like passing a child to safe arms. "This was mine," she said. "Amos taught me to shoot before the war. I kept it oiled, but it's never been fired since he passed." Eli took it with both hands, the metal cool against his palm. "It's a fine piece," he murmured. "Fine won't bring peace," she said, and for a heartbeat, her voice cracked. Then, softer, "You'll need it more than I will." Their fingers brushed, just a whisper of contact, but to Eli, it struck like lightning. He'd held a gun steady through storms and stampedes, but that touch sent something unsteady through him. Her hand was small, warm, alive in a way that caught him off guard. "I'll bring it back to you," he said. "I expect you to." She turned to go, but the wind caught her skirt, and she paused. "Eli," she said without looking back, "don't lose yourself out there. I've already buried one man who thought vengeance was the same thing as justice." He wanted to tell her he wasn't like the others, that he wasn't driven by anger but by something quieter, something that had her face at the center of it. But he couldn't say it. Words felt clumsy, so he nodded, and she walked away, leaving the scent of lilac soap hanging in the heat. That night he slept under the stars beyond town. He couldn't stop thinking about her, the way her voice carried that sharp edge of sorrow, the way her eyes didn't flinch when they met his. She wasn't like the girls at dances or the painted women in the saloon. Clara Tully had known love and loss, and yet still carried herself with the quiet dignity of someone who refused to break. When dawn rose, he mounted his horse and rode east. 3 days later, he found the Black Spur Gang's camp tucked in a hollow of red rock. 6 men. He waited until they were asleep, then moved like a shadow. The fight was short. The widow's revolver fired true, 6 clean shots, no hesitation. When it was done, the air smelled of gunpowder and blood. Eli stood alone among the bodies, chest heaving, hands trembling. He'd kept his word. By the time he rode back into Dry Creek, the town was waking. The widow was sweeping her porch, though her eyes lifted before the dust cloud even reached her gate. She knew. Somehow, she knew. He dismounted, hat low. "Ma'am," he said, "it's done." She looked at him, silent for a long moment. "Was it worth it?" He swallowed. "I reckon it was what needed doin'." She nodded, took the revolver when he offered it. Their fingers brushed again, this time not by accident. Her eyes softened, though her lips pressed into a line that was half sorrow, half relief. "Your hand's shaken," she whispered. He glanced down. "First time I ever killed a man," he admitted. "Didn't feel the way I thought it would." "What did it feel like?" "Empty. Like I left something of myself out there with him." She studied him a long time, then reached out, slow, deliberate, and touched his cheek. Just once. Her palm lingered a heartbeat longer than it needed to. "Then you did it right," she said quietly. He caught her hand before she pulled away, not to hold it, just to feel it there. It was the only human touch he'd known in months, maybe years. There was nothing indecent in it, only the simple ache of 2 lonely souls finding warmth for a moment. "Clara," he said, her name unfamiliar on his tongue, "I don't know what to do now." "Live," she said. "That's what Amos would have wanted. That's what I want." He nodded, though living seemed harder than dying had. "Will you stay a while?" she asked after a pause. "I might," he said. "Till I can sleep without seeing their faces." She smiled, faint but real. "There's a spare room out back." Clean linens. You can work the fence if you need something to keep your hands busy. He almost said yes. He wanted to. But he looked east, to the horizon painted gold, and something in him stirred, that restless pull of the trail that every young cowboy knows. I can't, he said finally. Not yet. Her smile faded, but her eyes stayed kind. Then promise me you'll come back one day, when you've had enough of running. He touched the brim of his hat. You have my word, ma'am. And then he mounted up, the sun at his back, the widow's gaze heavy on his shoulders. As he rode out, he didn't look back, because if he had, he might have stayed. The desert swallowed him whole, his figure shrinking against the horizon until he was only a shadow moving west, young, untested, still untouched by woman, yet marked forever by the one who trusted his hand and his heart, if only for a moment. The years didn't move fast in Dry Creek, but they moved all the same. The saloon got a new coat of paint, the preacher buried 3 more souls, and the widow Tully kept her porch swept every morning at sunrise, just as she had when Eli Cartwright rode away. Sometimes, when the sky burned red, she'd see a lone rider out by the ridge and her heart would stutter. But it was never him. The desert has a way of stealing men and giving back only their stories. Eli's story went quiet for near 5 years. Folks said he'd gone south to work the Mexican border, or east with the railroad men, or maybe up north chasing rustlers for bounty. Clara never asked. Some nights she'd sit by the lamp, turning that pearl-handled revolver in her hands, remembering how his fingers had trembled when he took it. It was a strange thing, to miss a man she'd never truly had. But she did. Then, one late spring evening, she heard the sound of hooves, steady, unhurried, coming down the main road like time itself had circled back. She stepped out onto the porch and saw him. Older now, broader, dust on his hat, sun in his eyes. But that quiet look, half shame, half yearning, hadn't changed. "Ma'am," he said, dismounting. "Didn't figure you'd still be here." "I told you I would be," she replied. "You look tired." "I am." He tied his horse at the post and took his hat off. For a long while, neither of them spoke. The wind filled the space between their words, warm and restless. Finally she said, "You hungry?" "Yes, ma'am." She set out bread, beans, and a pot of coffee. He ate slow, careful, as though every bite was an apology. She watched him, how his hands, still sure and quiet, carried a new kind of weight. When the meal was done, she poured him another cup. "You still wear your gun," she said. He looked down. "Habit. You still need it." He hesitated. "Sometimes I think I am it." She smiled faintly. "You were always more than that." Silence again, but softer this time. She reached out, touching his sleeve, just a brush, but it was enough to make him look up. "I came back," he said, voice low. "I see that. I didn't think I would. Didn't think I should." "What changed?" "Everywhere I went, ma'am, I kept hearin' your voice tellin' me to live. Only, I don't reckon I knew how without you in it." Her hand lingered on his arm. "You've learned," she said. "Or you wouldn't have come back." He took her hand then, not rough, not bold, just steady. The same way he held a horse's reins. He didn't kiss her. He didn't need to. Sometimes a touch says everything words can't. Outside, thunder rumbled far off, and the desert wind began to turn cool. Rain was coming. For the first time in 5 years, Dry Creek would see something grow again. The storm broke that night, hard and cleansing. Rain fell in sheets over the dry earth, washing the dust off rooftops, filling the cracks in the road. Eli sat on the widow's porch, watching the lightning roll over the mesas. She came out and stood beside him, shawl drawn close. "Funny thing," she said. "Amos used to say the rain smells like forgiveness." Eli nodded. "Never thought much on it. But maybe he was right." They watched the downpour in silence until it softened into a steady whisper. Somewhere a coyote called. The air smelled of wet sage and old dreams. "You fixin' to stay long?" she asked. "I don't rightly know. I've been ridin' too long to remember what stayin' feels like." "You could try." He looked at her then, really looked. The years had touched her hair with silver, but her eyes were still fierce, alive. She was no ghost of the past, she was the only real thing left. "I ain't sure I deserve to," he said. "Deserve's got nothin' to do with it," she replied. "You come back, Eli. That's enough." He turned toward the open land, the vastness of it pressing against the horizon. "I used to think a man was only worth the fights he'd won. But maybe he's worth the ones he lays down." Clara smiled, a small, quiet thing. "You always were older in the head than your years." I ain't so sure of that. She stepped closer, her hand finding his again. Then let time do its work. The moon broke through the clouds. The light caught her face, strong, tender, unguarded. Eli wanted to hold her, but instead he just stood there, breathing the same air, close enough to feel her warmth. You ever think about what could have been? He asked. Every day, she said. But I'm more interested in what still can. And that was the beginning of something new, not loud, not sudden, but real. A slow kind of love, born not from youth or heat but from quiet understanding. From the way two people could share silence and find comfort in it. Weeks passed. The fences got mended, the barn repaired. Eli took work with the local rancher, came home to supper, sometimes laughter. He still rode out at dawn now and then, chasing the horizon just to remind himself it was still there, but he always came back. One evening, Clara brought out the pearl-handled revolver, setting it on the table between them. It's yours now, she said. He shook his head. It belongs to you. No, she said gently. It belongs to whoever needs it most. And right now, you don't. He looked at her, understanding dawning slow and deep. You're sure, she smiled. A gun's meant for fightin'. But you, Eli Cartwright, you've finally learned how to live. He didn't speak, just reached out, covered her hand with his, and let the silence hold them. Outside, the night hummed with crickets, the stars wheeled slow, and somewhere far off, the desert whispered its old song of loss and mercy. For the first time since he'd left Dry Creek, Eli felt something settle in him. Not peace exactly, but belonging. A quiet knowing that he'd come full circle. He looked at her, eyes soft. Clara, he said, voice barely a breath, you were the only thing that never failed me. She smiled through tears she didn't bother to hide. Then we're even, Cowboy. And beneath that endless western sky, they stood side by side, not lovers of passion, but of something steadier, deeper. Two hearts worn by the same wind, still beating in rhythm with the land. The rain had come and gone, leaving behind the scent of life returning. And for once, Dry Creek slept easy.